And we've seen Sean Diddy Combs. He has 7 kids, 6 of them, one of them's an infant, a little girl, but 6, often his entire family has been in the courtroom during this trial, and they were for closing arguments last week. William, I'm going to turn back to you. This is from Denise Lopez. Thank you, Denise, for putting a question in the chat. We really appreciate it. We have a ton of questions coming in, so I'm going to get to all of these here. Does the defense/prosecution know what the verdict is on those 4 charges?
They don't. They don't. The verdict will be read for all of us at the exact same time. That's standard. They don't usually reveal what the partial verdicts are until the judge accepts the partial verdict. So it's drama across the board. I mean, jury deliberations, when you're an attorney sitting there in the courtroom, regardless of what side you're on, when you're sitting there with your client, or if you're on the prosecution side sitting there perhaps with victims, it is a dramatic time, and it's exhausting. I'm not surprised that, the sketch shows him looking a little scared, looking a little bewildered. The ebb and flow of the trial is such that everyone's anxiety is high, everyone's energy is high, and then it's completely out of your hands. It's out of the lawyer's hands, it's out of the defendant's hands, it's out of the judge's hands to some extent, and you're just sitting there waiting. And I find that, having done hundreds of jury trials, I find that waiting is very, very difficult, and it's very taxing for all.
Yeah, and this is day 3 of jury deliberations. We believe those deliberations started at the top of the hour at 9 o'clock. So we're right now at more than 13 hours and 30 minutes, almost 13 hours, 30 minutes since deliberations began on Monday of this week. And boy, what a long wait that has been. As far as yesterday and what we heard from the jury, and they can't seem to decide at this point on that RICO charge, the term they used was unpersuadable in their note, Candace. Do we know, or is there anything we can read into about how many of the 12 people are on one side and how many are on the other?
You know what? It sounded like it was kind of split down the middle, if my recollection serves me correctly. But even if you have just one that is on one side and 11 on the other, unpersuadable is very serious wording. This person is not moving to a point where they had to tell the judge, listen, we can't move any further. So that is a very big deal. As we know, it just takes one person to hang a jury. And if that person is unpersuadable, then that charge, you cannot be found guilty. It's a hung jury on that particular charge. So when we think about unpersuadable, whether it's 6, whether it's 3, whether it's 1 is all you need. And that's something to really consider when you're thinking about unpersuadable. But of course, if it is just 1, it might be a little bit easier to persuade on the other side.
And William, we have another question coming in. This is from CJ, just very simply saying, any bets on count 1? With that, I mean, to this point, we know the lower charges, very serious charges, but not the racketeering charge. They've made a decision on that. Based on that, what are you leaning toward right now of what they could come back with if they're able to find a verdict on that charge?
I want to just go back to something Candace said a second ago. I mean, the term unpersuadable is an interesting one. I think that they were signaling to the judge that we're stuck and this is as far as it goes. So given the strong language in that note, I'm going to guess that they actually aren't going to get a verdict on the RICO charge, and it's probably going to be hung. At some point, the judge has the opportunity to give them additional instructions. I imagine that would happen if they came back a second time and said, despite the fact that we slept on it for the night, there still is a juror who is unpersuadable, and that's going to be problematic. And I think that even with a further instruction, that may be it. I would be surprised if they don't come back as hung at some point today.
What about for you, Candace? I mean, you look at this, and again, I mean, I have the jury form right here. There's a prop for you this morning. But so we have the count 1, racketeering conspiracy. And when you look at the jury form, it has, it's for as complicated as it is, and we talk about it, like it's a relatively simple form where you have acts involving bribery, not proved or proved, acts involving arson, not proved or proved. If they're able to determine acts involving transportation for purposes of prostitution, check, that's 1. And then you go through, if you find Cassie Ventura, if he's guilty of sex trafficking, check, that's 2. That would be, why are we still at this point? Why is the jury, for some reason, there it is right up on the screen, and you can see they're kind of checking through. What would they be held up on related to this? Is it that enterprise part of it of, are we talking about Sean Combs being a bad person and a criminal, or are we talking about him as the head of a criminal organization?
Right. Well, you have to have the enterprise, as you said. You have to have two people that are conspiring to do something, and there has to be a willing act by Sean Combs. Remember, we got that question about the drugs. If somebody asked for the drugs from Sean Combs, does that count as him distributing the drugs? So they are really being very, very particular to try to understand what these underlying predicate crimes are. And I think that that is where they are stuck. There are so many things that they have to go through and understand. Remember, the first juror, one of the first notes we got was, listen, the person doesn't understand. What juror, I think was juror number 25, does not really understand what's going on. Could have been interpreted a lot of ways, and they got past that. But they now have to understand all of these predicate crimes. They're going to have questions along the way. So as you said, maybe if they've gotten to sex trafficking, they still have questions about these particular things that they just may not understand, or just does not resonate with them and who they are in terms of them being morally centered. Can I really say, as a juror, that Sean Combs, and having this enterprise, that the only reason it existed was for Sean Combs to actually carry out these particular crimes? When you put it that way, a lot of people I speak to say, well, that's impossible. He was running a whole business. But then, of course, you have arguments on the other side. Was he running a whole business? How has his business been doing for the past couple of years? He hasn't put out a lot of music. If we look at Sean John and his clothing line, that seems to have kind of dissipated. Revolt, he's no longer associated with that. His Making the Band TV show. So a lot of things have gone away. So you really have to think about, was this an enterprise? You know, during closing arguments, Mark Agnifilo, he showed a group picture of everybody who was a part of Bad Boy on one of his trips. And he made the jury look at this picture and say, does this look like an enterprise? Right? All of these people, you know, they look like they're having fun on vacation. Is this the enterprise that you would actually send somebody to jail for? And I think that that is what's really stumping people and making them think twice.